Thank you, Mike. What a wonderful journey, taking us back, seeing how this all developed, and where the message comes from that we pass on today to new people coming into the program. Okay, Mike, we've got a couple of questions for you that have been raised. One, as you have researched our history, have there been any really big surprises that have come out that that you could share with us?
I don't think any big surprises. I just all sorts of fascinating side roads, things that you go to, and you like. An example would be, most of us are familiar with the book, The Varieties of Religious Experience. It was it was a big book that the early members read. And in fact, Ebby gave one to Bill at Towns Hospital the day after his spiritual experience. And the guy who was running Calvary Mission that Sam Shoemaker had hired was the son of an alcoholic who recovered in Jerry McCauley's Water Street Mission by spiritual means. So and he was used in the book, The Varieties of Religious Experience, as one of the case studies. So you run into little things like that. And as you learn more about the people, it's just a fascinating journey. So I can't think of any, something that really surprised me, like, whoa, wow, didn't know that. So I guess I should have just said, no, not really.
Okay, that's fair enough. Another question for you. A very popular book that many of us are reading at this point or have read is Writing the Big Book, The Creation of AA. And, I'd really be interested in your take as to, how you feel about the book, the validity of the material that's being presented in that book.
I think it's a great book. I think Bill Shaberg did just an awesome job. It's extremely well researched, and whenever you're reading any history book, you want to know sources, and that book is filled with sources right down to what box and folder number this letter is or this information is. Whenever you're reading any history books, there's a line to be recognized between fact and speculation. And it may be informed speculation, it may be what you might call an informed opinion, but it's still an opinion. And there were a couple of places in the book where I just respectfully don't draw the same conclusion. One of them is he pretty much flatly states that the whole kitchen table scene with Ebby, it never happened. Didn't happen. We love that story. We don't want to let it go, but it didn't happen. And he bases that on an interview that Ebby gave in the 50s down in Memphis, where Ebby said, I don't know what Bill's talking about. We never had that conversation in his kitchen. And the fact is that Ebby made several visits to 182 Clinton Street in that period of time. And this could sound harsh, and I don't mean it to be, but remember, Ebby had returned to drinking and was in and out for many years leading up to him making this statement. I will not dismiss Bill and Lois's version of events. So let's say, okay, Bill made it up because he talks in parables. Okay, fine. Okay, fine. What about Lois? Are we just going to discount her? So there were three people involved. There was Ebby, there was Bill, and there were Lois. And Lois distinctly remembers the kitchen table visit. She remembers that day when she came home and they were there. So I will not dismiss that so easily. Another one is he implies that there was no six-step program. There was no six-step early AA program. Just forget about it. We don't hear anything about that. In any of the stories in the first edition, we don't hear about that. So there's no contemporary evidence that there was ever a six-step program for the early AAs. And I will not dismiss Earl Treat's story, even though his story didn't appear until the second edition. He was a pioneer member in Ohio, And he clearly states that there was a sixth step. He even writes them out in his story. He even writes them out. So I won't dismiss that so easily. So with that said, that is the only thing that I found that I had to, say, well, I love you, Bill, but this is kind of you're coming to this conclusion on your own. And I just will not dismiss Lois, and I will not dismiss Earl so easily. But it is a great book with tons and tons and tons of really good research and good information in there.
Great. Thanks, Mike. We have an interesting question, during the Wednesday meeting with Henrietta Sieberling orchestrated, there was quiet time, and then the person received guidance. Please describe quiet time and received guidance. Yeah.
Okay. Well, some of you might have heard of what they called two-way prayer. And quiet time is simply they would start the meetings and they would, well, as it implies, they would be quiet. And that's when they were meditating and they were receiving guidance. They were communicating with the God of their conception. And then when quiet time was over, they would share their guidance. And in Ohio, this became a little bit of a bone of contention. The New Yorkers split from the Oxford group in 37, and it wasn't pretty. In Ohio, it was more of a longer process, and it got interesting towards the end there. But at the Williams's house on Wednesday night, these alcoholics vastly outnumbered the non-alcoholic Oxford group members. And the Oxford group, and when you read Dr. Bob and the Good Old Timers, I forget what chapter it is, but it's a great chapter explaining the split. And getting all of these alcoholics to sit still for quiet time just was almost impossible. They couldn't stand it. They were just beside themselves. And then when quiet time was over and they would receive their guidance, it was always the non-alcoholic Oxford group members that had received guidance that was usually what we would say today would be taking the alcoholics inventory, and they got to think, why does your guidance always concern us? So anyway, there was friction there and there were other reasons, but the quiet time was the two-way prayer, and the guidance was when you discussed what you felt you were receiving from God in that meditation.
All right. Okay. One final question for you, Mike, this morning. Mm-hmm. Why is Founders Day June 10th, 1935, when Bill's sober date is in 1934?
Well, it's because they're using June 10th as the day that Bill met Bob. So that's something that's just like, pick a date. Pick a date. I mean, why isn't AA's birth date when Ebby had his last drink? We could go round and round with this. And there's also, if any of you have heard that June 10th is probably inaccurate, that is most likely correct. I still say June 10th because what's the big deal if it's a week off? But actually the medical convention that Dr. Bob went to started on the 10th. So we're probably exactly 1 week off. It was probably June 17th, but who cares? But they just use that. And why does King School Group use July 4th, 1935 as their begin date, when they were meeting at the Williamses under Oxford Group auspices? I don't know, but I ain't gonna argue with it. AA says that's group number one. It's group number one. It's all right with me.
There was one last question that came in, Mike, and I'm just going to throw it out to you. And it comes from the writing of the big book that we were talking about earlier, and evidently in the preface, I didn't pull it out to look at it, but he mentions the fact that Bill is prone to hyperbole and exaggeration. And the question is, do you think that's an accurate statement?
I wouldn't use hyperbole, but I would say that Bill would. It's pretty clear that he would stretch a tale to make a point. He would do those things with the best of intentions. So yeah, I don't think that's inaccurate, but I think, and Bill Wilson certainly doesn't need me to defend him. He really doesn't. But it just seems that since Bill had such a self-deprecating sense of humor, and was so very transparent on everything, that people sometimes tend to take a little license with taking his inventory, and he's not here to defend himself. Some of the things there's a plethora of Bill W. books out there, and some of them are very well researched and they're very good books, and some of them are not worth the paper they're written on, and some of them just have these outlandish things that they present as fact, which are actually not. And I think people read those things and they hear those things, and they almost get this dim view. And that is just, to me, so very, very unfair. Would Bill stretch a tail a little bit? Sure. Was he a liar? No. Was he out to make a buck? That's the one that always kills me. Bill Wilson was just trying to make money off of AA. That is so ridiculous. My God, a sober Bill Wilson on Wall Street would have been a millionaire many times over. He suffered financially devoting his life to Alcoholics Anonymous, and we owe him that. So I just feel sometimes there's a little disrespect, and I just think it's inappropriate. But in Bill Shaberg's book, where he portrays Bill as somebody who would stretch a tail and spoke in parables, I wouldn't argue with that, because he also goes on to say, to talk about the deeper motivations for all of that. I mean, Bill Shaberg is not a Bill basher at all, so I'm with him on that. The only place I diverge with him a little bit is with the kitchen table thing and the 6 steps. I'm hanging on to those. Don't you take those from me.
Okay, my friends, this has been terrific. Once again, Mike, thank you so much for presenting this to us today. Everyone have a terrific rest of your day. Enjoy the rest of your gratitude month, and early happy holidays to you all. And God bless you.